It is a battle of two 2-0 teams, one of which is a little bit of a surprise given that Sam Darnold is the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. But Sam Darnold, as he did in his last extended stretch as a starter in Carolina a couple years ago, is playing pretty passable football. So that's something we'll cover in today's afternoon live stream. Bobby Slowik spoke to the media a couple days ago. I was in Eugene, Oregon, and traveling and having travel nightmares along the way, so I didn't get the chance to respond to it until now. But he brings up a really a bunch of good stuff, as Bobby always does, about this Vikings defense, and led by Brian Flores, previously a head coaching candidate for the Houston Texans, currently still suing the Houston Texans. But Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Vikings, does a really good job of disguising his looks, shifting his coverages. Harrison Smith, the safety, is all over the place. He's deep and then he's blitzing, or he's at the line and then he's deep. It presents a lot of challenges for an offense. Thanks to BetUS for sponsoring the video. Here's Bobby on how they discern what is real and what is a distraction when reading defenses pre-snap, like Brian Flores is.
Yeah, we strain a lot on understanding what's happening and what's occurring. In particular, for us, we strain a lot on what's happening post snap. Really, for defenses like this, it helps us a lot just as a starting point. Hey, what happens after the ball snap? But knowing what's going on before the ball snap definitely helps you anticipate, helps you get where you need to get to faster. So hammering all that out with his defense, I mean, Flores does a great job. There's a lot of chaos, moving pieces going on. But then underneath it all, as you keep watching it, like, they're extremely technically sound. They play their tail off. They hit. They do all the things a really good defense needs to do, and that's on top of how much they make you mentally strain. So it's a good challenge for us this week.
Okay, so let me get Bobby's face up there with his big cap, looking like he's way too young to be a future NFL head coach. But I hope that works. I hope that works against him in the job search. Brian Flores' defense, they do a great job of everything that Bobby Slowik was just talking about, addressing the pre-snap, the post-snap. I thought it was interesting that Bobby emphasized the post-snap because, as much as we think about, okay, Tom Brady comes up to the line and he knows who's blitzing and he knows exactly what's going to happen after the snap, I think sometimes that's a little bit overly glorified by people like myself included. The thing that in the modern NFL is defenses have gotten better and better at disguising and shifting post-snap. It is, all right, the quarterback, especially on play action, if the quarterback's got his back turned to the defense as he's executing a fake, then he turns around. He's got to rapidly figure out, how does this coverage look different than what they showed at the snap? And I think CJ has done a great job of that as a young quarterback. If you look at the 49ers game last week, Brock Purdy it was 6 sacks in that game. At least 3 of them were coverage sacks. And some of that is related to the Vikings presenting one look, then shifting to another, and then all of a sudden the quarterback is left without options, or at least not the options that he thought he had. So there's a lot on the offensive line, yes, but also the quarterback just in understanding what his options are. In the first half of that game last week, I thought the 49ers did a really good job of getting the ball to George Kittle, but then George Kittle got banged up. And there were some game flow things in the second half that slowed him down too. They got the ball to Kyle Juszczyk. They utilized screens. They did a lot, and they ran the ball really well. Jordan Mason really got going in that game, and actually had a nice role going in the fourth quarter last week too. But they just the Vikings did a good enough job of controlling the clock in the second half. The 49ers never really had a chance to get it going. And it was really those sacks that Brock Purdy took and some of his bad decisions and the interception and the fumble that really made it a lopsided game. And I know the score didn't look overly lopsided, but at one point it easily could have been 27-7 in favor of the Vikings, but the Vikings fumbled on the 49ers goal line. So it's very much a mental challenge for CJ Stroud this week and the offensive line because of all those things that Brian Flores does. Next question on if there are any extra elements to seeing a technically sound defense done at a high level against the system that he comes from and the system that the Texans run. Okay, if I recall properly, the question was more along the lines of, hey, the Vikings did this against the 49ers. Do you see any similarities in what they did to the 49ers in your offense, which is, pretty similar to the 49ers offense?
I think at this point, the Houston Texans are the Houston Texans. And I know everyone has scheme trees that they come from, but the reality is, I think everyone would agree when you kind of look at it now on tape, based on our personnel and based on what we do and what we call, we're not the same as San Francisco. San Francisco is not the same as Miami. Green Bay is not, even though we all kind of probably stem from the same big tree. I think we're all different. And it helps us as far as coaches. Like sometimes we can get some looks from games like that, which is always more beneficial than, if we had a bunch of games where teams are just in 10 personnel spread out the whole game and we get no in-core looks. So it helps us a little bit prepare, but by and large, a lot of it's understanding their rules, how they teach it, where they like to align, what they want to do, and then us finding our way to try to attack that.
Okay. Bobby, he contradicts himself a little bit later on, and it sounds like more of a contradiction than it actually is. Obviously, all of these offenses become their own offenses. Sean McVay's offense became extremely different than Kyle Shanahan's offense, even though you'd expect some similarities. In Sean McVay's first year with the Rams, he realized, oh, I don't really have a good tight end, but I've got 3 really good wide receivers. We're not going to become this 2 tight end heavy, type of personnel package that the 49ers might use. I do think the outside zone run and everything that comes off of it is something you very much see with all of these teams. And even if the Rams have moved away from it, they still do it well when they do it, and they set things up off of it. So that's where I think there's still similarities. There's still more similarities between the 49ers and the Texans than, maybe some of these other teams that have diverged away from it. That's neither here nor there. Ultimately, look, Kevin O'Connell does a lot of the same things too. So there's certain things when you see Brock Purdy perhaps struggling with a decision or struggling with what he's seeing in coverage that definitely relates. And I think the Texans will get a lot more out of watching the 49ers film than they'll probably have gotten from watching the Giants film for multiple reasons. I think Brock Purdy's a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. I'm sorry. It's just I'm a contrarian, I suppose. Next question on the balance of wanting to run outside zones while trying to overcome the fact that defense are just they know you want to run outside zone and they're going to try to stop you.
Talk about it all the time here as an offense. We talked about it last year. I think you guys would have saw it last year. You're going to see it this year, weeks 1 to weeks 8. Like that's where we make our team. And every year that team is different, and what we become is different. And we all need to grow through those 8 weeks. And a lot of that comes back to, okay, what fundamentals do we own? Like what do we wind up just knocking out of the park after getting rep after rep after rep in games and putting that into action? Because we put that into action in training camp already. But when you get into games, it feels different. The people you're going against are different. The shells you're seeing are different. And being able to handle all that together is really what's so critical early on in the year. And that's something, we just continue to strain to do. We obviously, I can't tell you the offsets, can't give you the secret sauce, man, but there's offsets to it. But the starting point is we just got to own what we do.
Yeah, I think the offsets to if they're shutting down your outside zone, can you run inside? And we know this going back to, I don't know why I have this. I've got a plastic spoon in my hand, and I have no clue why. That's going to be my new gimmick. I'm going to be it's going to be like Sager's goofy suit. I'm just going to be the guy that has a plastic spoon in his hand. I don't know. Going back to teams that are going to take away the outside zone. All right, well, then you got to be able to run it up. You got to be able to run old school gap scheme at times. There will be no Dameon Pierce this week. It looks unlikely that Joe Mixon will play. It's going to be a whole lot of Cam Akers, who is better with the outside zone than perhaps some of the inside stuff. But we saw reasons to be encouraged by him, notwithstanding the fumble on the goal line last week. And then perhaps whether it's a Gumbawale or British Brooks or somebody or something else. And then also the tight ends getting involved in the pass game more than they have been. I mean, we've seen it in spells and shots, but if teams are going to work like hell to take away the deep ball and to take away your top 3 wide receivers, then I would like to see the fullbacks, the tight ends, who happen to be the same groups of people, by the way, get more involved in it. And you saw the 49ers do that last week with George Kittle, who's kind of a different, not really a comp to anybody on the Texans right now, but also Juszczyk had a nice catch on the sideline. Juice Scruggs being back will help. There was some bad snaps in the run game where I don't even want to blame Patterson individually necessarily, but there's clear there wasn't the same cohesion along the line. There's also, I think the offensive tackles didn't look as good against the Bears as they did the Colts, and then come to find out the Colts might just really suck at run defense. The Colts have allowed over 400 yards rushing so far through 2 games. So the podcasting linebacker phenoms from the Colts not looking so hot right now. Their front seven they don't seem to be stopping anybody, whereas the Bears were able to stop the run pretty effectively. Jordan Mason ran 20 times for 100 yards last week for the 49ers. So if Mixon can't play, like Jordan Mason is no Christian McCaffrey, but Jordan Mason was good enough to have some success versus this Rams defense. Next question. Okay, this is interesting. At first, Bobby thought he was being called out personally, but it's about the league in general. And if he believes that the lack of explosive plays in the pass game around the league is a product of what defenses are doing to adjust to offenses.
I think some of that has to do with there's a lot of young quarterbacks in the NFL, and I think some of it has to do with scheme wise, like how do you help young quarterbacks just get into a rhythm and go play. It also is, defenses have changed. Like the NFL goes through a lot of different patterns. Even since I was on offense 4 years ago, what we were seeing as far as what defense shells they gave you, how they played you in their different techniques is very different than it is now. Like I know specifically as far as us, we're getting a lot of 2-shell right now. And I would have said a year or 2 years ago, like there was very little of that. And how you respond to that, how you react to that, how you approach teams that at the end of the day are going to do everything they can to try to take away explosive plays and give up, shorter passing is our job on offense. And then eventually they react and then you react, and it just keeps going back and forth with different ways of arriving at the answer. But I think right now it's kind of a combination of all those things. Defense is playing different shells, passing games being different, young guys in the NFL really getting their shot a lot earlier than I think, in previous years they would have at the quarterback position.
So I should have kept the exchange in where I don't know who was asking the question, said, there haven't really been a lot of explosive plays. And Bobby said, I think we had 6 last week or 9, however many it was, which includes the run game. But Bobby, it's interesting with Bobby and these things, because you remember he worked at Pro Football Focus for a few years where he was just watching everything around the league. So for a football nerd like him, or CJ the football nerd, that was probably a lot of fun for him. I'm guessing there's certain things about PFF that also drove him absolutely insane. But in terms of just watching all the film, you get a feel for all those trends. This this phenomenon all of a sudden where teams have wholesale started to say, all right, we're going to play a bunch of cover 2 and we're just going to take away the deep ball, to the point now where Mel Kiper is saying that cover 2 needs to be banned, as if cover 2 hasn't been in existence since 1974, which it has been. And we've seen an explosion of the passing game, obviously at various points during that span. This is something that I think the challenge for the Texans is, I think they understood and they knew they were going to see a lot of cover 2, and they were going to see teams say, all right, look, we got these 3 wide receivers and any one of them can kill us. We got to be super careful. But now in realizing, okay, this is going to be our life this year. This is going to be kind of like it was with Pat Mahomes the year before Tyreek Hill even left, where all of a sudden teams said, all right, whatever we do, we're going to keep Tyreek Hill from killing us on one play. And Pat Mahomes had to become a different quarterback. And it wasn't a smooth transition with Pat Mahomes. He's still very good. It was just he had to learn. And I think with CJ, just because CJ's wired a little bit differently, not for better or for worse, but I think CJ's, CJ, he doesn't take chances, and he doesn't have necessarily that he has an appetite to drive the ball downfield, obviously, but I think he's just very mature in terms of young quarterbacks in understanding that it's going to look different from game to game. So I think that that's what we've seen over the first couple of weeks, where CJ's played just absolutely fine, but without earth-shattering numbers. That's what's going to happen as long as teams continue to play this way. The pressure is to take advantage of that with a run game. And in week 1, it looked really good. In week 2, it didn't look so hot. That they got to be able to exploit these defenses that are going to play with deep safeties, take it easy. I think Flores will probably be, even though he doesn't blitz as much as he did last year, I think he might be even more conservative in terms of not even calling some of the more aggressive zone defenses. I think they'll be in cover 2 more than they're in cover 3, for instance. Next question from Bobby. Remember once a year I have this thing where my voice just completely falls apart. I'm on 7 different drugs right now to prevent that from happening. I'm trying like hell not to go on hiatus for like 1 or 2 weeks because my voice disappears. And not to mention the radio listeners really hate it. It's a rough listen for 4 hours when I've got this. Ready to hear hurtful reviews of Seth Payne. Oh no, are there Viking fans in here? All right, let's see. At what point is it fair to say that offenses are a step behind defenses early in the season because they are still finding their identities?
I do know, like, again,
I started this halfway through.
As it relates to us and what we go through, like the biggest growth we have as an offense last year, and I believe it this year, is really those first 4 weeks. And some of that has to do with everything that happens in camp and in preseason. But how you really gain rapport with everyone. The front 5 having continuity, the guys on the edge, and the quarterback being on the same page route-wise, everyone being on the same page in protections as far as the pass game goes. Like there's a lot that goes into that, and I think the more you throw the ball early in the year, the more that stuff can show up against kind of what defenses are doing now. And I think as people get more used to it, it'll just pick up faster and faster.
Yeah, again, that was kind of like a league-wide question about offenses just maybe not being, they have to catch up to the defenses. I think that with the Texans specifically, there is that element of, all right, figuring out who you are and who, you might have a feeling for who you think you are. And then last year, for instance, okay, we thought Dameon Pierce was going to be the engine that helped drive that offense. And it took them a while to figure out exactly which personnel they needed in the run game. I think when it comes to the run game with the Texans this year, or just the offense in general, if they're going to start seeing such conservative play out of defenses to try to limit the deep ball, this is where they really got to get the tight ends humming. They've got to get the running backs really involved in the pass game. And as one of you had pointed out earlier, who doesn't want to see the gadget plays out of Bobby? I feel like the gadget plays at certain moments have been good for the Texans offense so far. It doesn't, you don't want it to be your staple necessarily, but I do think that aside from developing the run game and getting that going better to be able to exploit things, take advantage of these opportunities you have underneath in the shorter, safer stuff with screens, with short passes to the tight ends. And at times it's unfortunate for Brevin Jordan that because I think he was a real explosive option in that regard. Cade Stover's coming along, but he's not necessarily the same type of athlete as Brevin Jordan. So I feel good about this week, though. BetUS, let's see, has the Texans at -1. Remember, they started off at -1.5. And that's accounting for the Texans being on the road. I think a lot of it really comes down to quarterbacks in this matchup. Like Sam Darnold has played well, but he also is the same old Sam Darnold in terms of he's going to throw you an interception or two. The interception that he threw on a deep ball down the middle where Fred Warner made an incredible play, and yet it also still might have been an interception by the safety on that play. Like Sam Darnold was writing an arm, writing a check that his judgment couldn't cash in that instance. Right now he's got 4 touchdown passes, but he's got 2 interceptions. That's his, even when he was playing well in Carolina, he was still at a 2-to-1 ratio there. There was an intentional grounding where I think the officials gave him the benefit of the doubt. And they didn't call intentional grounding because they thought, well, clearly he's not trying to force the ball to this receiver when he's going down to the ground. I'm not so sure about that. Right now, BetUS will give you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,000. And it's a great website. They'll give you your own personal account manager. The payouts are extremely
Great vision.
fast.
He's been running.
Hold on a second there, Bobby.
Rams.
Trying to give BetUS their money's worth on this one. My goodness. So their raspy voiced podcaster can do some work for them. Go to BetUS, damn it. Let's see. I've ignored you guys because I didn't want to get distracted. I'm going over to Zadok Jewelers in a little bit for Watchtemberfest. I'm not watching that game, so no spoiler alerts. Akers got 4.6 yards a carry versus a better runs defense versus a better defense. The Vikings gave up 100 yards on 5 yards a carry to the 49ers. Back up half bad. Yep, we've addressed that. But yes, I'd like to see Diggs and Tank targeted more. I would too. Right now, I mean, Tank is more of a rushing threat than he is a passing threat, just in the way he's been used in the first two games. Again, I'm not overly concerned about it at this point. Tank's got less than 40 yards receiving. I think Diggs is about 70 yards receiving with a couple of touchdowns. But I think that adjusting to the reality of the way defenses are going to play them, that's Bobby's biggest challenge over the next few weeks. Is it's fine if hey, Nico is producing, and it's been no issue for Nico. He's got 3 straight regular season games now with over 100 yards receiving, obviously 2 this season. But I think just in how you get the ball to Diggs and how you get the ball to Tank might change a little bit from what perhaps they had planned. And I think we're going to start to see these targets. And the nice thing is, after you start seeing that pendulum swing, then defenses adjust to that and you open up shot opportunities downfield. And a lot of this also just depends on the Texans running the ball well consistently. And I understand what you're saying about Cam Akers right there, but for the duration of the game, they didn't run the ball as well last week as they did the week before. It's a matter of just consistently running the ball when you need to run the ball. Next question for Bobby Slowik. Speak of the devil, on what he feels Cam Akers does well that suits their offense.
He's great vision. He's been running, Ram zone scheme. He did the same thing in Minnesota. He's really good at reading that. We call it riding the wave, finding the right hole to hit. He always plays under control. When he sees it, he hits it. He finished physical. And he has really good contact balance, and I'd say those are the things that jump out with Cam. You pretty much see that every carry.
Yeah. So again, even though Bobby earlier said hey, don't be comparing us to the 49ers. The Texans are the Texans. There's some similarities. And that was the appeal of signing Cam Akers, is that when the Rams were running a boatload of outside zone, that was when Cam Akers was at his best. When the Rams stopped running a boatload of outside zone, they weren't as good at Cam Akers wasn't as good a fit for them. Cam is now one of these stories. There's just so many players that have been swapped back and forth between the Vikings and the Texans, because Cam was with the Vikings last year. So we got Cam Akers, Danielle Hunter. The Vikings have, and the Texans have Stephon Diggs. That was one of the headlines I saw. Will the Vikings boo Stephon Diggs? I don't care. Danielle Hunter had a little bit of a contract scenario at the beginning of last season. He and O'Connell got together and figured it out, and that could have been acrimonious, except that it doesn't seem that other than in smothering quarterbacks, Danielle Hunter doesn't seem to have an acrimonious bone in his body. It's just a gentle giant. But Danielle Hunter, Stephon Diggs here, Cam Akers here, familiar faces that you'll see from the Vikings. Blake Cashman, Kamu Grugier-Hill might be starting because the linebacker whose name escapes me is injured this week for the Vikings. So Kamu Grugier-Hill is there. Obviously, Jonathan Grenard. Jonathan Grenard doesn't seem to be like a big chip on his shoulder revenge game guy, but whenever you face your old team, you're a little bit extra motivated. So Danielle Hunter, Jonathan Grenard, both, do they cancel each other out? I don't know. Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson in a defense that was really blitzing the hell out of a rookie quarterback last week, looked just like everything you'd want them to be. Hopefully the Texans don't have to blitz as much this week. And I don't think D'Amico would be as comfortable blitzing against Sam Darnold. I know it sounds weird. Where's my spoon? I'm supposed to hold my spoon for emphasis. It sounds weird, but Sam Darnold, who I had forgotten, by the way, was only 20 years old when he got drafted by the Jets. I mean, think about that. Being 20 years old, being drafted to the Jets. And Bowles was the coach when they drafted him, but he ended up with Adam Gase. So, like, imagine getting married to Adam Gase at the age of 20. That's never going to work out. That's just, there's so many people that are, they go on to have happy marriages later on in life, but they got married when they're 20. And statistics would tell you it's going to be a flaming disaster most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time when you get married when you're 20. That's what Sam Darnold now has been in something similar to this scheme, because Bobby told me I shouldn't compare the schemes too much. But in being in San Francisco for a year, watching and seeing the way Brock Purdy operated, and then taking that and using it in a very similar scheme in Minnesota, it's been good for him. I think Sam Darnold does have more answers to the test when you do blitz than a young Caleb Williams would have. So I'd rather just see this be Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson getting after it along with everybody else and doing it with a 4-man rush more so than having to blitz this week. And for those of you who just joined the stream, like Brian Flores' defense, I told you the whole offseason that Brian Flores' defense blitzed more than anybody else in the league last year. Not so much anymore. They do a lot of funky stuff, but it's not because they're blitzing all the time. So they're very mysterious. They disguise a whole bunch, but they also rush with 4 very effectively and then ambush you with the blitz. Same way these last 2 defensive coordinators have been pretty good at doing. Yeah. I was kind of fact checking myself earlier because I was trying to remember the timeline of Sam Darnold. And I for some reason I thought Adam Gase had drafted him, but that was Adam Gase came in the next year. And the first picture that popped up was Adam Gase looking all crazy. Marry that guy. No way, man. No way. All right. On how much he thinks the development of offensive lines has impacted how effective too high safeties have been and aiding the defenses into going into too high coverage. So I think the gist of this question was probably, all right, is part of it that offenses can't exploit these too high looks with the run because they're not as good on the offensive line as they used to be. That's my guess at the gist of it.
I would say in general, a lot of the offenses in the NFL have emphasized the pass game more. And because you emphasize the pass game more, you got to give up something. And I think the run game in a lot of places is less emphasized, and that makes it a lot harder when they're dictating that you run the ball to still be able to take advantage of that, And I guess I would point at us even last week as an example. I mean, we got a significant amount of 2-shell defenses again. Yeah, so like last week we got a significant amount of 2.
I cut that up because somebody's ringtone went off, so there was a little bit of fun and frivolity there. But I'm trying to keep these things to less than a half an hour. I can't have all that fun and frivolity.
Shell defenses, and that you want to run the ball against looks like that. Like you can't throw the ball down in, down out against that. It gets hard, and we strain it, we work it, and we were not as successful as we were the week before. So there's a lot of time you have to devote to that, and I know we need to continue to do that.
So, and earlier, Ivan Pace, the linebacker, is out, and that's where Kamu Grugier-Hill might be starting, which is it's an area of opportunity for the Texans if Kamu Grugier-Hill starts, just because I know he made a bunch of fun tackles for a loss and everything, but he was god-awful and horrendous in coverage, just mentally, physically, everything. Like, it was bad when he was here with the Texans, and it would drive me insane that people wanted to prop him up like he was this uncut diamond that you'd found out of nowhere, and like what a blessing he was to have us. Usually there were times every game where all 10 defensive players for the Texans would be running in one direction, and Kamu Grugier-Hill would be running the opposite direction. So that's an opportunity. I don't think all of a sudden he's going to blossom into a different player. Van Ginkel, aside from having one of the best names in football, I'm looking at his stat sheet from last week. It's funny. He had 4 tackles and a sack, but 2 of them were TFLs. He had a sack, and he also had, I want to say it was 2 deflections. Let's see how many pass defended. 1 deflection, and then one other where at least he was in, like, he got his hand in the air and kind of affected the vision enough to make a bad pass. Van Ginkel's all over the place. Blake Cashman goes sideline to sideline, all of that. He is who he is still. But the biggest thing that the biggest thing that the Vikings are really able to do is inject a lot of doubt into the quarterback's mind, gum up the process enough for the offense that you end up making mistakes. There were times last week, the 49ers, I mean, the 49ers had 20 minutes time of possession in the first half. They were really physically in a lot of ways dominating, and yet the Vikings came up with the big plays when they needed them. So it's a hornet's nest that you're flying into here with Brian Flores' defense. As far as what Bobby was just talking about, yeah, it's kind of what we've already talked about. Look, these things come and go, and defenses have been getting lighter and lighter over the years to accommodate, the fact that the pass games were developing so much. And in doing so, all these little wannabe John Madden, Madden the video game, not John Madden the actual football coach, but all these little wannabe Madden offensive coordinators have spent a whole lot of time working on passing game, and the run game's been neglected a little bit. So as the pendulum swings, and especially this year with the Texans, as teams are going to play conservatively to try to take away the deep ball, then man, take advantage of it, run the ball. And you don't do that just by calling run plays. You got to devote time to it, and your offensive line's got to give a damn about it. All right, here's last one. This is Bobby Slowik on Brian Flores' defense and what it's like preparing for it. I thought this was a really, really interesting answer.
Challenge about this defense is it's almost like he does everything he can to try to eliminate coaches from the equation. Like he creates a lot of chaos, but then behind it all, they're fundamentally sound. They run, they hit, they do all the things the defense needs to do. And for us, like we strained this week, the biggest thing for us is our guys got to go out and they got to own what they're doing, and they like we have to play well against this defense, and our quarterback is leading the charge on that, and he knows that if we block well, if we throw well, if we're on time, if we're good in our protections, that's what gives us a shot. Otherwise, like the way this defense is structured, there's not things anyone can really cook up as a play caller or as a coach that's going to answer the problems that get presented this week.
Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. Hey, I meant to remove Bobby. I removed you, Bobby. So, what did he say? Take the coaches out of the game, and I think that's precisely what Flores is trying to do, is create this chaos by showing different looks at the line of scrimmage. Sure, all the sim blitzes that are all the rage these days, but then and not giving the quarterback a clear look pre-snap, then the quarterback's either A, not able to make the right adjustments, or B, doesn't feel comfortable necessarily even checking into what he would normally check into. When he sees this one look, he might check the direction of the run, or check from run to pass, or vice versa, because he knows that what he's seeing isn't what the actual defense is going to be. So that's the part where you take the coaches and the game plan out of it a little bit, and it comes back to the quarterback, the offensive line, the wide receivers just adjusting to it on the fly. The other thing too is I think Flores is pretty cognizant of just not showing too many tendencies. Now, the really big area of opportunity when you have a defense that shows a lot of pre-snap disguises is that there are natural weaknesses in the defense because of that. So if you've got a linebacker who's up at the line of scrimmage showing blitz, especially if you've got all 3 linebackers up at the line of scrimmage showing blitz, then they've got to hustle like hell at the snap to get back to their spots in coverage. And that does 2 things. 1, it creates a window of opportunity in the passing game. But 2, if it does end up being a run, but your linebackers are busting their asses to get back into their coverage spots, all of a sudden it creates an area of opportunity in the run game. So but it's up to the quarterback, because you can't necessarily get it from the play call or know exactly what's coming. It's up to the players themselves to figure those areas of opportunity out. on the fly. And I think CJ is really good at that. The offensive line is a work in progress when it comes to adjusting to things. The Bears do a really good job, for instance, last week of shifting their defensive line pre-snap, and they do it a quarter second before the snap. And that just changes all the rules for the offensive linemen. And in a quarter second, they got to do all these advanced calculations of exactly how the play has changed, and it screws offenses up. Um, the other part of that too is when you do that on defense, as a coordinator, you understand that there's an inherent weakness there. You got to rely on your players to be smart enough to do it, to understand that their responsibilities are different than from where they're aligned, and to also understand when sometimes like, okay, well, look, you know what, out of this formation and in this situation, I got to get back to my coverage spot. So there's it is chaos. That's what Brian Flores is trying to insert chaos into your operations. But as an offense, as long as you're calm, cool, collected, and knowledgeable about it, then there's an opportunity for chaos on the other side too. So it's I'm looking forward to it. I'm supposed to be live streaming at 3 today as also. I wanted to do more of a comprehensive deal. I might have to I don't know, man. My voice she ain't doing so hot right now. So I will live stream at 3 p.m. I don't know how long it'll go. It's probably going to be a little bit shorter than 36 minutes. So thanks everybody. Oh, hit the like button before you go and subscribe. If you're if you're a Vikings fan, hit the dislike button. I don't care. Subscribe and come and hate on me. I don't give a damn. Just pray for my voice.